Backpack Broadcasting continues to bring you the best original sports content, but now you can get more of the content you love. For as little as $3 a month, you can get access to bonus content, including behind-the-scenes footage and interviews from the Sports Walk, Sideline Stories, or the Ain't Hard to Tell podcast. All this exclusive content comes via Patreon. There are tiered levels of patronage, and each Backpack Broadcasting patron receives exclusive perks. Your support helps Backpack Broadcasting create more of the original content that you love. Visit Backpack Broadcasting's Patreon page and become a patron today. Ain't Hard to Tell Podcast, episode 74. Dexter, Henry, Brian Fonseca here, and we are back with a guest. Good friend of mine, good mentor to me, from ESPN, NFL reporter Josina Anderson on the line. Josina, what's up?
Hi, how are you guys? Thank you for having me.
Great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm a little under the weather this morning, but it's all good. So I'm just interested to see what y'all want to talk about today.
Well, we appreciate
that. Could go one of many different ways.
Mm-hmm. We appreciate your time, especially being under the weather. Everybody knows getting sick recently. But first of all, we want to kick it off. Whenever we have other journalists on here, we like to ask them about their career, how they got to where they are, just to try to give people a little background of them. So I know your story because we've talked about that. But what is the Josina Anderson story? How did you get to where you are with ESPN as an NFL reporter?
Well, my story is not an overnight story for sure. I'm not one of those people who things just fell in my lap, so to speak. I would say it's a culmination of, just a lot of self-belief and grit over a lot of, disappointment and struggle. I went to North Carolina, and I was not a journalism major, but I did a lot of internships. And the reason why I wasn't a journalism major is because Tony Kornheiser, who at the time was a radio personality, and I was an intern for one of his shows, basically told me that it didn't need to major in journalism in order to do journalism. And just he kind of encouraged me to major in something else other than that. So I would have that as a fallback. And so I took that advice. So by the time I was in school, kind of focusing on it more, my goal was really to have a job by the time I graduated. That was like a fear of mine of not having a job in the field at the time that I left school. So, I really worked hard on making sure I was developing a tape with a local affiliate in the area, and, really starting prior to my senior year to get those tapes out. And I was very lucky to get a job, I think, off like the second tape that I sent out.
Oh, wow.
Which I really didn't know what I was doing, because it wasn't like, practicing sportscasts or things like that. So the people at the affiliate where I was at for my internship really helped me in terms of constructing it because they knew what it should look like. And I had a photographer whose name I don't remember, but he was really key because he put my tape together for me, helped shoot my stand-ups for me. And at the time, I really didn't even know. So when I got my first job in Oregon, all the way across the country from Chapel Hill, first of all, it took a lot of guts to just leave and go. But I literally, once I graduated, I had to get up and leave, go all the way across the country. And I really learned on the job. So that was, I'd been around things in terms of my internship, but it's not like I think I would have been even more prepared probably if I was a major, in the sense of I would have been practicing more things that I was asked to do off rip. And because I thought it was so easy to get a job, I just thought I had the mentality that it would be hard to get out of there. but and my goal was to stay there at least a year. But because I kept sending tapes out when I was looking for my next opportunity, I kept coming second, I kept coming third, kept coming second, kept coming third. It really showed me. I was like, damn, it's it's not as easy as I think to get a job in this field. And so I ended up, one day I woke up, I had an epiphany, and I'm like, man, I'm sending out all these tapes. I was sending out like 50 to 100 just calls and tapes, like weekly, bi-weekly, like just really focused on that, and could not get a job. And so one day I woke up and I just had an epiphany, and I said to myself that I'm sitting here waiting for somebody to give me a yes to be able to go where I want to go, and I just need to just go. Because I was going to be stuck in Oregon, and I was not happy out there. I was really far from my family. I wanted to come back home. So I ended up quitting my job, gave 2 weeks notice, and then I left after a year, a month, and a day there to the T. And I went to D.C., and I started volunteering at a local cable station in that area, local county cable, not even Fox, ABC, county cable. But the blessing of that opportunity was that they covered the major sports in D.C. So I went from doing like high school and local sports in a remote town in Oregon to covering the Wizards or Redskins. So that was the blessing of it, even though it wasn't and obviously I wasn't getting paid. So the degree that I had acquired that was not a journalism degree, I was using that to train people by day. And then I would report either at night for free or on the weekends. And I did that for 4 years.
Wow. What was that like? Time. What was that like mentally, having to do that, knowing that, because I think sometimes people don't know this, like you're not getting paid, how hard is that?
Tough. It was very tough, very, 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 very tough. Because it's not what I went to school to do. I didn't go to school to be a trainer, even though that was my, degree was in exercise sports science. So there was a lot. I mean, I went through a lot. First of all, when I moved back home, I was sleeping on my mother's couch because one of my brothers had my old room. I didn't feel like it was right to ask him to leave, so I slept on the couch for 4 years. And I was toiling. And there were a lot of times I kept sending out tapes over those. It wasn't like I intended it to be 4 years. I kept sending out tapes and things like that. Was not getting a job. I had created my own radio sports segment on WKYS where I looked for they allowed me to look for my own sponsor, so I was able to get paid from a sponsor that way, and did a segment on KYS called Scoop Center at the time. I was doing multiple shows, round ball, sideline report, all these different things where I wasn't getting paid, but I was training by day. And the blessing of it was that I was able to create my own schedule, so I could train multiple people at once.
Yep. In
like an hour, make a lot of money or a good amount of money. And then what I was doing was reinvesting that back in myself. So I would send myself to All-Star. I would send myself to, away games and things like that, using the credentialing of the people that I was working for. So I was always astute to be able to use that opportunity to garner more contacts. So long story short, the fourth year that I was in Oregon, the fourth year that I was in D.C., you know how we always go to, some of us, not all of us, on New Year's, some of us go to church and do your offering and your tithing. And you know how the preacher's always like, this year is your year.
But he says that every year.
And every year. And I was faithful going to Bible study. I was faithful, going to church for New Year's. And I just remember saying to myself, I was like, if it doesn't happen this year, I'm going to leave the business. Like I remember thinking that, and I started to look for courses. And I thought I wanted to become a sports psychologist, and I thought I was going to go to West Virginia at the time.
I'm glad you didn't do
and
that.
I started getting ready for that. But one day I went to church. True story, although most people, probably think it's not, but it's a true story. I went to church. I remember leaving church, and I was walking on the sidewalk, leaving church, and I was just crying because I felt so lost. Like, what am I doing? It was like 5 years out of school. I'm not getting paid in this. And it was very, very difficult. And a woman drove up beside me where I was walking. And I just remember she was in an Oldsmobile. And she came out the car. She stopped. She pulled up beside me on the sidewalk. I didn't know who she was. And she came out the car, and she was just like, God told me to tell you your job is coming. And so she got back in the car, and that was it. And 6 months later, I was in a gym training somebody. I remember stretching the hamstring. I remember it just like it was yesterday. I was stretching the hamstring. A call rang in my office in this gym, and it was the Fox affiliate in Denver calling me, telling me that they were offering me a job that I didn't have to audition for, because I had auditioned for this job 2 years ago, didn't get it, and that person who did get the job was moving up to sports director, so they had an opening, and they called me and they said the job is yours if you want it. So I ended up taking that job. There for 6 years, went to ESPN after that. I mean, I could go on and on about, all of the adversity and trials. But, so the bottom line of it is that when I say it wasn't an overnight story, it wasn't an overnight story.
Yeah, literally wasn't an overnight story. I remember you telling me that story about the woman coming up to you, which is just amazing in that happening and how it manifested, even though it was months later, how it happened. I think that's amazing for people to hear that, you got to stick with it sometimes,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely.
And also the part about, well, you said you were working essentially for free for 4 years, that was?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because a lot of people now, because I'm going through some of the same thing now, because I'm in the first few years of doing this, if that makes sense. And, a lot of my peers think that, I want to become a sports writer because when I graduate, I'm going to get a job right away. And I'm like, especially now, like, that's really not how it happens. And I don't think enough people understand. What I wanted to know was, like, what were some of the things that you were thinking about during that time in terms of, like, what kept you going ultimately to keep pursuing this, even though at some points you looked maybe hopeless?
Really, and it sounds corny, but it really is just belief in myself, because I knew that I knew that I had it.
Mm-hmm.
And some people, just because you choose to do a certain field doesn't mean that you're right for that field, right? And so I think the word or the key word there is discernment, right? You have to really have discernment about yourself to know, to know like you know. And I knew it. I knew I had it. That's how I got the job. I'm not really having experience before just even being in the field.
Yeah.
Because I knew I had the personality for it. I knew I had the stick-to-itiveness for it. I knew I had the drive. I knew it was naturally investigative. I knew just whatever. I possessed those things. But at the same time, life is hard, and life has real circumstances. Right. And and I wasn't making any money. You know what I mean? So it was. I can't even I don't know. I kind of think back to that time. It seems so long ago, but at the same time, it was a lot of prayer, it was a lot of days where you thought it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
And just continuing to, fight through it.
You fought through it, and now you're ESPN, you're a national NFL reporter. Doing your thing. What's that like? Because I know from you, we talk often, and I know, the travel, especially during the season. I know how busy it is and how hard you work. What is that like? How much have you loved doing what you do?
Well, I didn't set out trying to be an insider. When I got in this business, it wasn't like, even when I started working for Fox in Denver, I didn't start off that way, but remember when I told you I had that radio internship at WKYS, and I had that show called Scoop Center. When I was covering the Wizards back then, I had a knack for making contacts, and a knack for people trusting me, and a knack for getting information, and I learned that by watching Michael Wilbon and Steve Weiss and the John Mitchells and those people get information that wasn't necessarily the same everybody else had. And what do I mean by that? So like what I noticed early on in my career, and I'm kind of going back to go forward, but what I noticed early in my career is that a lot of people would stay in a locker room and everyone would, kind of get the same sound in a group, and that would be the same thing written in the newspaper, or you saw the same soundbite on local television. But what I noticed about these people in DC is they really taught me by observing them how to get different content, by cultivating your own relationships, staying back after everyone else left the locker room, and then trying to get something different. So I took that mentality to Denver. And when I went to Denver, I noticed that everyone was doing the same thing. Like everyone would stand around a locker room and stand around an athlete at a locker and all get the same sound, and everything would be the same watching TV. And that really stood out to me. And I really had this mentality that I'd gotten from DC to get your own thing. And if you think about it, when I went to Denver, I was the third person in the sports department. I wasn't the sports director. I wasn't the Monday through Friday person. I was the sports producer reporter. So I'm the third person. But out of rip, sorry. Okay, I had a text message coming in. Sorry.
No problem.
Out of rip, I remember I broke a Maurice Claret story like as soon as I got to Denver, and then I broke something with Jerry Rice. And then, something else was given to me in regards to Ricky Williams missing the entire year because of a drug infraction. And that's the one that really, really set it off, because someone just gave that to me that I didn't, I didn't understand the magnitude of it. Anyways, that story went national. It was a big deal, and people started to wonder who this was. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because I'm trying to make you understand that back then, and this was a long time ago, kind of telling my age on myself here, but back then, like nobody was like, to be an African American female, and even just in the number 3 position, breaking national news, and then kind of developing that reputation in Denver. Like nobody was doing that back then, and so I kind of started to see that. And so what it did is I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of a thing. And I developed my own sports blog called the Denver Sports Insider blog. And I concentrated my information that I was getting there. People started reading it nationally. And then I remember, like, I believe Peter King and Jason Whitlock noticed it and started writing about it. Like, who is this girl? Not even the number 1, number 2 is breaking this news nationally. And then it started not to just be about Denver. It started to be about, other teams. I was breaking news about the Redskins, the Dolphins, or what have you. And people are like, well, how did you do that? Because what I realized is that, and I don't know, I just had this sense that, when visiting teams would come into town, don't just pay attention to the home team. Like the way that you're going to expand your contacts is by focusing on the people who also come in town. And then also when your contacts go to other places, you see what I'm saying? Then it expands your repertoire. And the next thing you know, you have this big, repertoire of contacts. So then now to answer the question, to bring it full circle with what you asked me, I do enjoy it because, I realized the fruits of the labor of it. Like I never really understood why I was in Denver that long. Right. But then now when I see all these contacts that I acquired by this way that I was doing it, it fully served its purpose in terms of creating a niche for me at ESPN. And then something that's somewhat, unique to me as a female, African-American female doing this. And then I enjoy it because I thoroughly love the NFL. It's something that I would watch even when I'm not working. So it makes it easier to get better at it because you have a genuine passion for it.
Yeah, no, beautiful, and you do a great job. Now, last season, which was rather interesting, one of the big things that you had was a sit-down interview with Odell Beckham that got some, interesting reactions, as you and I have talked about from it. What was your reaction to how other people reacted to that in terms of Odell and some of the things that he said? Like, how did you feel about that in general, the public's reaction to it?
Well, I mean, there was a lot of different reactions to it. There were reactions to it in terms of people appreciating the interview, people appreciating the depth of the interview, people appreciating getting those two people to sit down.
Wayne, who's also in the interview that I didn't mention. Lil Wayne was also in the interview for the listeners who do not know. Yeah, sorry, Joe, go ahead.
Yes. And so I'm thoroughly appreciative to them for doing that together. The trust that they instilled in me, the reflection of our rapport to even get that done. And honestly, I feel like that was the majority of the reaction. I think that the reaction that came from some in the media, not necessarily the viewers, but from the media, so to speak, to me was a reflection of, I think some people wanting to gaslight it for their own purposes. I think that's a good word to use.
Yep.
And also to, sometimes there is envy that, is reflected in the way people speak about it. And to me, I just think that it was comical. At the same time, it was, unfortunate. But, I think that the fact that you're able to get something like that done, the fact that people were talking about it for a month after they're still talking about it, just kind of lets you know the mark that it's set. And honestly, it speaks for itself. I think the one thing that I'm very proud of with it is that, and I try to make this a hallmark of all of my interviews, not just that one, is, the point of it is to really try to show or get those people to show rather different, sides of themselves, and to do that in a way where they're reflecting their honesty, they're reflecting their inner truth, they're reflecting the comfort that they have with you, but also at the same time respect, to answer the question, to be engaged during the interview, to be able to ask them things critically, but also at the same time, have a natural conversation. And I think that requires, a skill and certain traits to be able to pull that off. And that's always my goal, to try to achieve that.
Now, Joe, I thought you did, but one of the things I found interesting is around sports journalism, and all of us here who do this, is we always say that we want athletes to be more honest, right? And in this, you got some honest responses from Odell, and he, spoke about, Eli's play and where the Giants were at the time. I believe they were 0-4, 0-5, I can't remember, at the time of that recorded interview. Odell was honest, but he got a lot of criticism for this, for his honesty there. What do you make of that in the media? Maybe the sort of, I don't know if I want to call it a double standard, but the way we say we want athletes to be honest, but when they are honest, they get ripped for it. Like, what is up with that, and is that okay, or do we need to do better in the media with that?
Well, honestly, I felt like Odell was very, very careful, actually, with his thoughts. A couple things. One, Odell is a very, very thoughtful person. He thinks a lot, and I respect that about him. And I do think that he is misunderstood by people who don't know him, which is most like anybody, right? So number one, he's very thoughtful. And number two, I knew how he felt about a lot of the things that he answered already, in the sense of just the previous conversations that, he and I had. And listening to his answers, I knew how he was being mindful of what he was saying. So like when I asked him a question about Eli, and he says, I think so, or I don't know, or, or what have you, I think he was being very mindful in his answers. But because he is Odell, just even using the word I think, and because he's speaking of Eli, is just enough to set it off. And the difference with Odell is that people in the media, and I'm talking about, people in the industry, everyone knows how much of clickbait that he is, in terms of being able to generate attention to whatever, articles that people were writing about it or whatever. So to have like a big take about it or to have an article or opinion about it was going to drive this and drive that.
Mm-hmm.
And so my answer to you is that you really, in assessing that and seeing that, and you really have to just see it for what it is. You see what I'm saying? That's what it was. And if you think about that, like right after that, Jimmy Butler had done an interview with Rachel Nichols.
Yes.
And after that, there were some comments that Jalen Ramsey had made about things in Jacksonville. And after that, DJ Swearinger made some comments about things in Washington, D.C. in terms of the Redskins. And after that, Alan Hearns, or maybe I think it was before that, Alan Hearns made some comments to me about, things with the Dallas Cowboys. And what I really feel like is the interview was an opening, I feel like, even for other athletes to start talking up even more about their situations this particular year, last season, more so than any season. But the difference is that I feel like people reacted way more to Odell, who by comparison to some of those comments and some of those athletes that I mentioned actually said things that were even more damning. Or not even more damning, because I don't really think he said anything damning.
Agreed.
But I think comments came from different athletes around the country in the same sport who said things that were far more damning but received way less attention because it wasn't Odell. So when you know that as an interviewer or just as a person in this business, when you know that as even being Odell or, being Wayne, then it is what it is. And it really just depends on how you're able to handle it and take it. Now, if you use Antonio Brown as another counterexample of someone who is, whose interview was, somewhat closer to that, Antonio was very confident in what he was doing and also in just letting it be what it was going to be and not really giving, two what.
Right.
So, it just was going to be what it's going to be, and I think you're just going to see more of that moving forward. So.
Is it disappointing at all? Not just the reaction, but in terms of you obviously it took a while to put that together, maybe, and then you have the full sit down, but then people just want to focus on not even the 6-minute version that went up first, but just the parts where Odell might have sounded like he was saying certain things that people were trying to exaggerate that he wasn't actually saying. Is that disappointing or discouraging at all? Because you obviously had
why would I be disappointed? I just did a sit down with Odell Lil Wayne. There's nothing that anybody can say or react to anything that's gonna make me disappointed. There's no part of me where my mindset would be like that. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like when you've done something and you've accomplished something, nobody's reaction to that. The fact that they're reacting, I think, is actually indicative of the get.
Mm.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Or jealousy, as you alluded to earlier.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like I knew what was happening. You see what I'm saying in terms of the get and the blessing of it and how thankful I was for it and what they shared, and nobody's reaction is going to take away from that, whether it's because they didn't do it themselves or they can't understand it or they're mad that Odell doesn't talk to them or I don't think that way.
I also just hate that we're in that sort of, we're in that clickbait climate, for lack of a better way of saying it. And Dexter and I talk about this all the time on the podcast where, people are just reaching sort of like you alluded to, just trying to aggregate and things like that, which kind of messes up some of the reporting, for example, because people don't care about certain things.
Well, that's why it's important to have a voice and have a counter narrative. So when people say things and put things in the atmosphere to try to create a narrative, that's why you have to speak up and counter it. So part of doing that is releasing the full raw version. Part of doing that is speaking out myself about it. Part of doing that is when I'm on a national platform or TV and I'm asked about it or whatever, or speaking on it or continuing to speak about what I think about, his circumstance with the Giants or what have you, or just in general. And I haven't been shy about that on TV in terms of, speaking about how I feel, because at the end of the day, when people talk about the interview and did it have an impact on this and have an impact on that, like the Giants are 8-24 in 2 years. There's nothing about an interview that created them being 8-24 in 2 years. And there's nothing that, I did in terms of that, you know what I'm saying? Like, they are what they are. And, we hope that they are able to achieve what they're able to achieve just like any other team. But at the same token, one particular athlete shouldn't take undue burden, for something that has a lot to do with a lot of people.
Now, Joe, we're speaking about OBJ, he has taken a lot of burden. Obviously, he was recently traded from the Giants to the Cleveland Browns. How shocked were you by that? I was a little shocked by the trade. Maybe I shouldn't have been. Was it shocking to you? And how do you think he fares in Cleveland now?
I wasn't shocked that he was traded because I knew that they were attempting, or that they were very, very open to it, counter to what the general manager had been saying, because I had gotten that intel since before the season ended and had continued to follow up on it since midway to late through last season, through the combine and after. I had talked to him many times about it. I've been keeping tabs on it. So by the time I was on TV during free agency, talking about the fact that, teams were still talking about it, it was shocking to everybody else. And some of my colleagues didn't believe it, which was evident. But I kept saying that. And one thing I don't do is I've broken a lot of stories, not just tens, not just the hundreds, probably in the thousands. You know what I'm saying? I've broken a lot of stories over my career. There's nothing that I need to say just to gain attention. You see what I'm saying? Like, I've been doing this a long time. I don't, you know what I'm saying?
You don't have to play that game.
If I'm saying it, if I'm reporting it, is because I heard from somebody that matters. There's just too much out here to risk putting things out there. At least for me, I'm not one of those people fortunate to just, fall forward in life by accident. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we can't do
I have
that.
to watch. I don't have that type of, benefit. So I don't just, be out here just recklessly saying something. So when I was on TV the day before he got traded, saying that, there were teams that were still talking about him, or that teams that were interested in trading for him, and that was known, is because I had, information, that was direct enough to say that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, they got to put some respect on your name for your information and what you've done, Joe. They got to put some respect on your name. We need that. None of this doubting. I don't know what's up with that. What's up with that? Come on.
Well, it's not even. I mean, I've been doing this, like I said, many years, and it's not even that people doubt. I don't think it's really doubt, actually. Honestly, sometimes it's not doubt. Let me tell you what it is. It's deeper than that. It's shock that they didn't know, or how come they didn't know? You see what I'm saying? So it's really not doubt. It's shock. Well, how could she know that? You see what I'm saying?
Because she's dope.
So that's what. Sometimes that's what it is, especially if it's a certain type of story, or if it revolves around something or whatever. But we get too deep with that. So the point is,
right.
is that I heard it, the day before, so I knew it was coming, and then the day of the trade, I had gotten a text from a source that told me the Browns were talking about him, and like I said, I told Odell right away. I texted him and told him about it. And we had been in contact about it throughout the day. And then but what I didn't know is that I didn't know it was going to happen that day. And I didn't know that it had, progressed that quickly. And honestly, that's my fault. I think what it was is that when I got the text, the reason why I wasn't even more definitive about it, and I said it was the AFC North team that was pursuing him, and I didn't say the Browns, is because I wasn't able to get my source back on the phone. And then I had to go on TV for like 3 or 4 hours right after that. and I got distracted. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
And then literally an hour after I got off TV is when it happened. So, and then I think I was texting at that time, even with Odell at the time that the news came down. So, anyways, that's how it happened.
That's crazy.
But I think
world.
Cleveland is a blessing for him.
Yeah, it's crazy.
With Jarvis Landry and everything.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's a good situation.
Absolutely.
What do you think was I don't know if this was the one, maybe you'll say this, but this free agency offseason, what do you think has been the biggest move that we've seen in the NFL this offseason so far?
I think the biggest move is Odell getting traded to the Browns.
Yeah, I thought that might be it. Yeah.
And AB going to Oakland, but I think we're all more interested to see the Browns just because of the mix of talent, with Baker and Jarvis and that defense. And so, I think that there's a high probability and a high likelihood that it's going to go, that they have, put it this way, that they have a high opportunity for success.
Browns fans haven't heard that in a long time.
Every game,
Browns fans have not heard that in a long time, Joe. High opportunity for success.
They had more so of it last year than any other year, so they're really kind of there, right?
That's true.
But the issue is two things. One, a football game you can win by maybe three things. You can win by obviously, can win by a point, can lose by a point, and the other team is trying just as hard too. So, just because you have all that accumulation of talent, you still got to win the game. And I think that they really need to start off quickly, right?
Yeah.
And have good success off jump. And I think that Baker Mayfield needs to stay healthy. So all of those things need to happen kind of, for it to kind of continue down that path of, all those things working together with the culmination of talent that they have.
I'm kind of fascinated by this whole Kyler Murray situation and whether or not he's going to wind up in Arizona. What's sort of going on there at this time now that we're getting closer and closer to the draft?
Well, two things. One, when he announced and he signed Eric Burkhardt, his agent who represents the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, Cliff Kingsbury, my immediate reaction, and I tweeted this, was, okay, well, who's going to be the number 2 pick? Sometimes when things are too strong of a coincidence, then it just is what it is right in front of you.
Right.
You don't have to think deeper than it. It's just like, okay, but then at the same time, you also know that, where his family is based, that agent is based there already. So, part of picking that agent too could have to do with the fact that they're geographically close, and his parents have an opportunity to be in the same area where Kyler Murray is. So that plays into it. And then the fact that he is Cliff Kingsbury's agent too, you have natural insight. But prior to that, you have to remember that he was making a choice between baseball and football. So to kind of do that, you would think, did he really have good insight into what his future may be in order to make that decision, whether he got that from whoever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so you kind of factor that into it. But even up to something that I heard last night, I still feel like, how do I say this? I think that there is leaning still towards that, and I know Chris Mortensen's already been on TV saying that it's going to happen.
Yep.
So, we'll see. Me personally, my style when I'm reporting to the draft is to get to the week of, or like the weekend before I really start digging in, because you always want, it's just like when O and I were talking about, whether he was going to get traded or not. I always said, let me get more updated information. Because something I might have heard in December might not be what I'm hearing in February. And it's the same approach with the draft. Like, I like to try to get a little closer to it to make sure nothing has changed. There's still college prospects out there who are still taking their 30 visits. And what that means to your viewers is each team gets 30 visits with 30 prospects. So the teams are still wrapping that up. And then most of these teams will circle back again and meet again to, re-review their notes and reassess things or whatever. So you kind of want to let that process settle down. So whatever team or whoever's telling you information, that it's the most up to date.
What do you think of two things? What do you think of Kyler Murray as a prospect, and what does that then mean for Josh Rosen? Because he's been linked a lot, possibly being traded to the Giants. What do you think about both of those things? Kyler Murray, can he play in the NFL, a quarterback with his size? And Josh Rosen, what's his future, if there is any, with the Cardinals?
Well, one of the things I like about any journalist or any insider or any just journalist, period, is someone who speaks on what they know, but they're always honest about what they don't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let me be honest about what I don't know. What I don't know is I'm not a huge fan of college football, and so I don't watch a lot of college football. I like the NFL. Consider myself obviously someone good to talk about it. Cause hopefully that's my job, right?
Yep, that's why we have you here too.
I don't watch a lot of college football. I'll watch the playoffs, and then I always joke with them when they come to the combine that I get to know you once you come to the combine, and then I really get to know you when you actually make the 90-man roster. And then from there, I'm going to really, really get to know you when you make a 50. It's just too many college teams, too many college games, too many stories. It's too much. And so what do I mean by that? So the whole purpose of me saying that is to say that what I know of him is the hype that he has around him, what I've seen of him on tape just by going back and looking back. And I feel like from a business standpoint, he has the ability to add a lot of cachet to the Arizona Cardinals. That the way that he plays fits with the coaching style of Cliff Kingsbury, and that it seems like a natural fit. So all of those things I do know. What I don't know is, as a young man, how he will react in a situation around men who are a lot older than him, who've got families, mortgages, and all that other stuff. And, it's just a different transition from the college game to the NFL that I cover. And, how he will react if there is a lot more adversity in terms of the results of the games and what he's experienced in college. All of those things are things that are to be determined. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. We don't know about that.
Where are we right now in terms of Colin Kaepernick, the settlement, that entire situation, and what's going on there?
I mean, well, he had the settlement with the NFL. The terms of that is confidential. So I think, on one hand, he was able to get some sort of monetary judgment. But on the other hand, we don't know the information that was gathered during all of those depositions as far as the claims that he was originally bringing, which was that the NFL was, colluding to keep him and Eric Reed out of a job in the NFL. And I think, for people who are following that story from jump, that part of it is disappointing because you want the transparency probably more than anything. So you just really don't know about the decision as to why they decided to settle at that point. There are some reports that came out initially when the news broke that it was, $60 to $80 million judgment. Then another report came out within the last month and a half or so that, or whenever it was, that it was only $10 million.
I saw that, yeah.
It's like, well, okay, most quarterbacks are averaging in the low 20s right now. So, and for the time that he missed, and you multiply that by the average of what a quarterback's salary is, why was it under that amount? Is that report true? I don't know. But, for those who maybe this is what is your next question, if he's ever going to be in the NFL again.
Yeah.
My answer to that is that, one, most likely it would have to be this year. And two, if it did happen, probably the only team that I see doing that
Carolina
would be Carolina, just because of the owner. He obviously they have Eric Reed on that team already.
Right.
The head coach is a coach who is a minority. That's just real talk.
Yep.
And, one of the coaches that is, head coach of the team via the Rooney Rule. Also, the owner is a new owner, and David Tepper is not part of the original ownership, group of, the original kind of group of owners that kind of have this, whatever. I guess what I'm trying to say is that all the other owners have been there for a while. David Tepper is new and kind of has his own way of thinking, which is evident by the fact that Eric Reid is even on that team. I think that's self-evident. That's not something that I have to illuminate. It's self-evident by the fact that Eric Reid is on that team. The only other team that I would potentially maybe think that there could be a chance is maybe the Chargers. When I think about the head coach and, and just the circumstance there, so maybe you'd have to be a scenario like what the Redskins experienced last year after Alex Smith got hurt, Colt McCoy got hurt, Josh Johnson, where you had, multiple injuries that would really necessitate, okay, we really had to do this and provide some cover for the team. But let me be clear, I think he should be in the NFL. I think he should be playing. Obviously, I think he was talented enough. But as the time goes by, and more time goes by, I don't know what his level of training still is. Right. And I know that teams have expressed, and I don't know, people out there can determine for themselves if they think it's an excuse, but I know teams have told me that they've wanted to hear from him more, direct on his passion for wanting to come back. And I know his response from people who represent him say that these teams already know this, and he shouldn't have to say that it's already known. So
interesting. One last thing real quick, Joe, before I let you go. On that, considering the money and the settlement, the whole debate about whether he got 60 to 80 million or 10 million, whatever it is, did you look at the settlement as a win for Kaepernick? Because there's some people that say, hey, no, this is a loss for him. I think it's a win no matter what he settled for there. What say you to that?
I'm probably in the minority on that. I have a lot of respect for his social activism. I have a lot of, and obviously I was one of the most vocal people about it on ESPN. So that goes without saying in terms of continuing to make sure that was a topic of discussion, and also continuing to shine a light on the inequity I saw in the situation and the injustice I saw in the situation. I think that's very important. I think that's part of the reason why you have diverse voices on television. So I think that goes without saying. However, I think that the things that he was fighting to illuminate with respect to this particular case, it was worth making it transparent. That is the first, to me, in my judgment. Of course, it's not my life. It's not my money. It's not my situation. And I respect him as a man to be able to make that decision for his own. He don't need that blessing from me. So none of that. That's not why I'm saying that. I'm just saying, with respect to respecting your question and just answering your question, I'm just saying I personally would have liked to have seen transparency on all the things that were underneath or the underlying concerns, because I think that is important, not just for what he was trying to, fight against, but also for anybody else that may come after them.
No, I hear you on that, and good points, and totally understand that. We know you gave us a bunch of time. I know you're not feeling the greatest, but you're the best at what you do. NFL insider for ESPN. Joe, thank you so much for the time. Also want to let people know you can catch Joe on NFL Live. She's on there constantly, doing a great job talking about all the stuff she breaks and everything she does. Thank you again for the time. We appreciate it. Next time you're back in the area, you got to come up and kick it with us. But we appreciate the time, Joe. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, you guys, thank you, and congrats on your show. Keep doing a kick-ass job, and have a good show the rest of the way.
Appreciate it, sister. Take care, okay?
All right, bye.
All right, bye-bye. What's up, listeners and supporters of the Ain't Hard to Tell podcast? We need some help from you, and it won't take up too much of your time. As we grow, we always want to hear your feedback, so take a minute or two to fill out a short anonymous survey. The survey link is right in the episode notes for this podcast. It's easy and takes less than 5 minutes. As always, we thank you for your continued support. I just heard from Josina Anderson, great NFL insider for ESPN. We appreciate her time, as we said once before. Really good to hear from her. A lot of time. There's so much we could have talked about in the NFL, but
definitely when we get in studio, I want to get into more about sort of the trials and tribulations of, you know, coming up in this career and things like that, because I was fascinated by a lot of the stuff that she said.
Yeah.
Just in terms of getting to Denver. Not even getting to ESPN, but just getting to Denver.
Yeah, it's funny because for me, you know, off doing this, we're good friends, and yeah. I had known that story about her getting to Denver. I only learned that maybe a couple months ago. Because, you know, she was giving me some advice with some stuff, and I'd heard that story about that and knew the 4 years and on the couch. And we both have a very similar thing, because when I was in between stuff doing journalism, I was also personal training, so we both have that similar background with that.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things I took away from it, and it goes to show people, and I hope people who listen to this can take away from it, is, you know, one thing that she said, which I always preach, is you have to believe in yourself no matter what. That is a lot easier said than done, though. It doesn't mean you're not going to have up days and down days or doubt yourself. But at the end of the day, if you believe in your craft and what you're doing and the goals you are trying to reach, it's all going to work out. The other thing, too, is that I think she took is that you have to put yourself out there. I always tell you, we've been able to do that through our own platforms. You have to put your own stuff out there. You can't be afraid.
Bro, have you seen WrestleMania?
Yeah.
Have you seen the WrestleMania coverage?
Yeah, let's shout out to Brian went and did some WrestleMania coverage. You guys should check that out.
Legitimately live the dream.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And shout out to Ashford Alonso, videographer, who came with me on the trip.
Who does some of our video work and pictures.
Yeah, she does some video stuff for the podcast and pictures for the podcast.
Yeah,
was able to bring her along. But yeah, just sort of independently was able to interview, you know, Seth Rollins was fighting Brock Lesnar in the main event of WrestleMania. We're recording this on a Sunday. You know, Charlotte Flair, Ric Flair's daughter, 8-time women's champion, who's already one of the best ever. Yeah, exactly. Stephanie McMahon needs no introduction.
Right.
You know what I mean? Mark Henry.
Right. But you went and put yourself out there, and it's independence on your own time. And people should know those things, too, because, you know, there's a lot of people on the independent grind and doing this stuff. And
own time and money. I bought a lot of that equipment that we used.
Yep.
A lot of it was Astra's, and a lot of it was mine also. And a lot of that I just bought Wednesday.
Yeah, and I was proud because I actually came to see Brian briefly the day before he did this to make sure all his stuff was right.
Right.
And
we thought we were screwed.
Nah, but you weren't. But it all worked out. But like just seeing that and the putting into yourself was something Josina was talking about. Putting that energy and investing into yourself.
She's talked
something that matters.
She's talked about that, and you've talked about that a lot too. It's just investing in yourself.
Nothing better you could do than that.
Getting the equipment, putting stuff out independently, whether it's on YouTube or Vimeo or Twitter or Instagram,
whatever you do, you can
whatever
get it
the
out
app
there.
is. Yeah,
especially
now you can get it out there,
and that's why even people like Josina and I in our kind of age range, who was a little bit older, maybe some of our listeners that might be listening to this, is that, you know, there was a time where you couldn't do that, but we kind of came into the time where you could start to be able to do that.
Back then, there was more so blogs,
right?
Yeah,
and so you could, but that was a way of starting to be able to do it. And once I think people of our age figured out like how we could start doing it in that space, and now this is why I tell younger people is like, yo, you have all the opportunities to do it and put your stuff out there. The only thing stopping you is you. Mm-hmm. Stop waiting for somebody to hand you something. Stop waiting for somebody to say, come and do a podcast. Go do your own podcast.
Especially now, I'm like, do you really want to work for people? You know what I mean? Like, for people, do you really want to wait around and get a job? Sure, but it's like I wouldn't want to wait around so then somebody could, because that's not gonna happen. Especially if you're a minority.
Yeah, you don't. Right, and
as we know by experience,
you don't have to wait for that. You can create your own opportunities, as Brian did. I want to go do something with wrestling. I want to do it. We wanted to do this podcast. We did it. I wanted to create a show called The Sports Walk. Season 3 is coming really soon.
Oh yeah.
Warm
weather, baby. Warm weather. That means season 3's coming.
Spring, summer. Season 3 of the Sports Walk coming soon. So yeah. These are the things that are good. And whenever we get a chance to talk with people like Josina or other journalists, is why it's always important. We always say we like to let people tell their story, because everybody's story is so different and it's so diverse. And people have different ways of how they got to it, but hopefully it inspires other people.
Right. You know? And I love when we bring on guests like that, because as you notice, like the Marley episode and probably this episode were two of the episodes where I was the quietest, because I was just listening. I was listening for the most part.
Yeah, we learned. Because
I've been watching, and I don't know if Josina's going to listen back to this and listen to get this part or whatever, but we didn't get to talk that much before. We talked a little bit before we went on air, but I've obviously been following her work for a long time. I didn't know much about the Denver stuff, so that's pretty fascinating. Just about how all that went. But yeah, I've been a fan of hers for a while, so that was also pretty cool on some sentimental level, if you want to say that.
Yeah, nah, it's dope. Anytime we can get friends of the podcast and guests up here, as we will continue to do.
Yeah.
It's good. We just keep extending and making our guest list even doper than it was before, because our guest list is pretty dope.
Yeah.
I will say that.
Yeah.
It's pretty dope.
Yeah, and we're about 74 episodes in, so let's get to these numbers.
Number 74. Ryan showed me this list. It's not a great one.
It's not a good. And it got worse because of something I told him off air.
Yes. Like somebody automatically got crossed off the list. I was like, nah, I don't know about that.
So we got Kenley Jansen, who is a setup man.
Yep.
For the Dodgers.
Yep.
Still with the Dodgers.
Still with the Dodgers. Who I like.
I tried to trade for him in the show. Last year.
Yeah. Ain't nobody care about your GM moves in video games, man.
I did a setup.
Although one thing, real quick.
Yeah.
Brian and I maybe had like an hour-long conversation, probably like a month and a half ago, while he was trying to make GM moves in NBA 2K, which I actually found fascinating, and I have not done the mode yet.
You gotta do it.
I know. But I found it fascinating today. I was like, how's he gonna get this trade executed? We'll get to that another time. We'll save that for another show.
Because it really puts you there. And coincidentally, in one of those, I was using Washington because I was like, oh, they're probably gonna fire Ernie Grunfeld. I was confusing with Glenn Grunwald. Ernie Grunfeld, probably going to fire him at some point. And, recently, that just happened.
You also realized you had a tough job to do after that, which is what I found fascinating.
I mean, that contract to John Wall is no joke.
Which to the point, we'll get to this at some point in our next episode, or further episodes. But taking over tough financial situations in the NBA and rebuilding is not easy.
Any sport, really.
Yeah, really.
But especially ones with salary
caps. Yes.
So we have Kenley Jansen, who we both like. We have Antonio Brown because he has 74 career touchdowns, which I just actually found out not that long ago.
Okay.
So that's pretty interesting. Bruce Matthews.
Okay.
We have Merlin Olsen.
Who did?
Joe Staley. And Nick Mangold. Now, you would probably think we would go with Nick Mangold here because he is a Jet fan. I'm a former Jet fan. We like Nick Mangold. However,
found out some things about Nick Mangold, somebody who supports, who we don't support, and I can't really support you if you support this person,
that particular person.
And I would like to say, Nick Mangold, in my time covering the Jets in the locker room, I think other people who've covered the Jets, fantastic guy, great with the media, was fun to talk to, very insightful and funny. So I'm a little bit surprised,
and really supports that other guy.
Which I'm a little surprised.
I'm
I guess I'm surprised about. But then again, I also said you don't know people sometimes, so why am I really surprised? Because I don't know the person like that. But that's a whole other thing. Yeah.
Do you know off the top of your head where Mr. Mangold is from?
I don't. It's somewhere probably in the Midwest.
Centerville, Ohio.
Yeah, it sounded about right. Okay. I'm gonna go. My vote's for Kenley Jansen. It's baseball season. Baseball started back.
It is baseball season.
We haven't even really.
Mets look all right.
Mets
look all right so far.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Here's the thing.
I know.
Last year, this time, they won 12 out of 14. A lot of people thought they looked all right, and it came crashing down. I think they look okay. There's still some people freaking out. They've won 6 out of 8 at the point of recording this podcast. I'm just going to let that be.
And for anyone who would say, oh, Kenley Jansen, whatever. 2-time Trevor Hoffman National Reliever of the Year and a 3-time Major League All-Star.
Yeah.
We are perfectly fine. He might be the best athlete on this list, not named Antonio Brown.
Yep.
Maybe.
I'd rather save Antonio Brown for his actual number. So Kenley Jansen has got my vote.
84. So 10 more to go.
Got 10 more to go. Yeah.
Sounds good with me.
Kenley Jansen it is. All right. Kenley Jansen episode. That's it for episode 74 of the Ain't Hard to Tell podcast.
He's actually a closer. He's not a setup, man.
Oh, he is. I thought he was closer.
I thought
he was before for
No, he was still with the Dodgers his whole career.
Dodgers. Oh. Yeah, okay.
Whatever. All right, cool.
Okay.
The successor to Eric Gagne, I guess.
Gagne. Okay, yes.
Remember that guy?
Yes, I do remember. Yes.
Used to kill me in MLB Advanced
2002. With another video game reference. All right, so that's a wrap for episode 74 of the Ain't Hard to Tell podcast. Thank you again to our guest, Josina Anderson of ESPN NFL
in studio Insider, soon
on NFL Live. She will be back in studio to come and kick it with us at some point, but we really appreciate the time she gave us today. Really good to hear from her. All right, so thanks to her. For Brian Fonseca, I'm Dexter Henry. Thank you for listening, supporting, watching. Please subscribe. Please also check us out, support extra content. We have great extra content coming really, really soon on Patreon. Contests that we will be announcing soon. Other stuff coming soon for this podcast. We appreciate your support. Please continue it for episode 74. Brian Fonseca, who loves violence as always, and Dexter Harry. Until next time, y'all. Peace.